Always choose
I'm Osama bin Javed at the Syrian Ministry of Justice, which until a year ago was a place of corruption and a symbol of fear. As Syria tries to turn a new chapter after years of rule by Bashar al-Assad, a new transitional government led by Bashar is promising truth, justice and the rule of law. There is momentum and there is scrutiny. The UN says its joint investigative mechanism is ready to support prosecutions led by Syria and holds evidence collected during the past decade. But critics warn the government's plans for a justice process are too narrow and focus mainly on the former regime, while atrocities carried out by ISIL, HTS and other armed groups have also scarred this country. At the same time, sectarian violence since the transition has created new victims who also demand accountability. So can Syria build a justice system which is credible, inclusive and fast enough to be effective? The Syrian Minister for Justice, Mazhar al-Wais, talks to Al Jazeera. Mazhar al-Wais, the interim Minister for Justice for the Syrian government, thank you very much for talking to Al Jazeera. Let's begin with the state of Syria. More than 100,000 people have either disappeared or are missing. There's countless mass graves. There's major crimes that have been committed by the previous regime. What makes you the right person for this job? Because everybody we meet in Syria is talking about justice.
In the name of Allah, I'd like to welcome you and thank you very much for having me. Matter of fact, the most important thing that is great motive to us in this particular period of time is the huge sacrifices made by our people. Our people have struggled too much throughout years and years, and the result was this blessed revolution that has sacrificed thousands of martyrs, thousands of detainees. So the sacrifices of our people were huge in order to find this new Syria that represents the history and civilization, Syria of the future. We need to have a better future for our children, and we need Syria to be back a center in the Arab and Muslim nation in this very difficult period of time. Inshallah, we will be part of this period to do our message, the message of justice. Justice is a great matter. Allah Almighty is the just, and Allah Almighty is putting this justice in a great position. Allah Almighty has asked us to be just and to always cherish benevolence. People want justice, people love justice. Everyone wants to see the new Syria where the citizen can see the right justice, the real justice in the state of law and the state of citizenship.
The past you talked about is quite relevant here, not just the past of Syria, but your own personal past as well. There have been accusations that were leveled against you for dispensing summary justice. How are you going to assure the Syrian people that the way you ran things in the Salvation government is going to be different from how you're running things now?
First of all, I don't accept these words, and the Syrian revolution was or has the most important aim, which is to achieve justice and to get rid of the injustice made by the previous regime. We need to get rid of the injustice, and we need to achieve justice within our geographical areas and the areas that are dominated by the Mujahideens at that time. That's why we have the judiciary, we have the High Council of Judiciary, and so many people in these areas and so many people in these centers have said that judiciary services and justice were fine according to these circumstances. We work in the judiciary, we work in the courts under bombardment and under shelling, And the war, the comprehensive war was there. Our capabilities were not enough, but despite everything, we managed to build at that time judicial system that can cope with that period of time. Today, we will never be prisoners of these experiences because its era has its own men and its own circumstances. We talk now about Syria. We need to get lessons from the past. We need to know the positive points and build on. We need to understand the negative points and to get rid of. Syria today is for everyone. According to the constitutional declaration, the citizens are equal in rights and duties regardless their affiliation, their sects, their religions. That's what we need to achieve now in the Ministry of Justice, to be a Minister of Justice for all Syrians and for everyone who lives in Syria, even non-Syrians within this government.
Well, in order for us to move forward, it's very important, the point that you just made, that the system of justice has to be the system for everybody and every Syrian. The question I have for you is that the past is also quite relevant. In the past, there have been some allegations against you that you called, for instance, the Alawi minority despicable. Can they expect free, fair, impartial justice from yourself? Because what you said in the past has cast doubt on what is going to come in the future.
I didn't say that. I haven't said that. We, from the very beginning, said that the rights of all Syrians, we spoke about the rights of all Syrians, our religion and our traditions cannot accept these general rulings. We need to distinguish, because our problem was with the dilapidated regime of al-Assad. We were against al-Assad, and Syria was two sides. The Assadis, the criminal Assadis that are composed of warlords, and the people on the other side, the people of the free people and people who felt injustice from every religion and every sect. We have never said that we have a fight with the sect or with the religion. All the Syrians, regardless their sects, religions, are equal in our eyes. They are all nationals. They are all equal in rights and duties. That's why we have always been saying that we are against the criminals and those who are supporters of al-Assad regime. And the evidence is the practical application. Regardless theories and these words that are being used by someone to get a meaning here and a word there, the practical application was clear when we entered Damascus and the coastal areas in different areas, homes in Syria. We treated everyone equally. The Mujahideen, the revolutionaries, have dealt with everyone according to the principle of President Bashar, a victory without revenge, despite all the problems and all the traps that have been put by the regime throughout the last 60 years. But the Syrian people have overcome everything, and the current leadership has managed to take Syria away from this period, away from these problems. That's why we need to correct this point of view and not to follow up such media definitions or a word from here, a word from there, that always aim at creating rifts between the sects, and they want to spoil the joy of the Syrian people.
Well, as Syria turns a new chapter, you've announced that there are going to be committees which are going to review the verdicts that were given by the Assad regime. How will that actually work? And those reviews, are they also going to include some of the cases which were previously attributed to other fighting groups, including the Hayat Tahrir al-Sham?
Let me tell you that the new country, the new Syria, is concentrating on one important thing, which is to achieve civil peace in the country. and to pave the way for the courts to be working properly, to keep and maintain the Syrian institutions generally. Since the very first moment of the victory, of the liberation, we went to these institutions, we kept them, we maintained them, and probably on the same day or on the other day, these institutions have started working. And we have kept everything running in order to keep and maintain the rights of the citizens, to maintain the services being offered to the citizens. This is a big gain that we achieved to get rid of the regime, to be a new regime, to be successful despite all the problems and all the difficulties. This is in itself a big achievement. It's a miracle. The Syrians' will, the will of the Syrians have helped us a lot. And we have faced, of course, some troubles, because, for example, we have a system in northern of Aleppo, a system in Damascus, a system in based in Syria. Because of the war, at the very beginning we started to think that these systems must stay and keep according to their vision, because they work within their own vision. Then later we need to integrate all these systems, all these judiciary systems, to be one, to work on the same direction. So in Aleppo, in Idlib, in Damascus, they were all integrated within the judicial system of the Syrian Arab Republic. We have areas in eastern Euphrates controlled by Assad. Assad have closed the courts, have expelled so many judges, have closed a lot of the country institutions. After our victory, we had talks, we had discussions, and the citizens there want the Syrian institutions to come back under the control of the Syrian government that work all together according to the laws in the Syrian Arab Republic.
So I would like you to explain to me, what is the Ministry of Justice that you have inherited? How many courthouses do you have? How many judges do you have? How is that system going to work? People on the street, the biggest complaint that they have against the regime days was that everybody has to pay a bribe. How are you changing all of that?
We have inherited, to be honest, a duplicated system. And when people used to say the Justice Palace, they used to describe it as the Injustice Palace. People were scared of the courts because the courts were, at that time, a source of terror and blackmail. The al-Assad regime has turned these courts to be courts for terrorism and to be a tool to attack people, to terrorize people, to blackmail people. And so many unfair rulings have been issued by these courts during the regime of al-Assad against the people, against the activists, against the opposition. Regardless the other issues that are related to the properties and rights, the aim today is to gain the trust of the citizens in the judiciary. We need to rebuild the judiciary now in a proper way that guarantees the independence of the judiciary, the transparency of the judiciary, the training and the rehabilitation that we seek now, and we activate the higher judiciary institute, and this institute will be very connected with the Ministry of Justice to prepare the new judge to be in harmony with the international standards that can be an example in the area and everywhere.
Now that you're rebuilding the Ministry of Justice, what is going to be the priority? Are you going to go after the lieutenants and the top tier of the Bashar al-Assad government? Do you recognize the cases in the European courts against Bashar al-Assad? How are you going to prioritize? What are the priority areas for you?
Our priorities, of course, in this particular period of time is justice. Justice is not to follow up this man or to follow up the other man. Justice should be a justice when it is a comprehensive justice for the sake of the citizens, for the sake of achieving the aspirations of the citizens. Justice has so many types, and we need not to confine the Ministry of Justice in a certain area or certain domain. The justice is a big, comprehensive principle, and in this particular part of time, we need to be fully aware of the transitional injustice, because we are part of this. As a Ministry of Justice, we are part of this. There is an independent agency for that, but we are quite interested in the judicial side. The court's verdicts, and according to, is supported by the country. We cannot take this for ourselves only. No, there are so many parties that have to be part of this matter.
Now, you do have to realize that there are people who face torture, disappearances, targeted killings, and they're looking at you for justice. So what can you tell the people of Syria about the legal strategy? You say that you're rebuilding the justice system completely and revamping it. What assurances can you give them, and how long will they have to wait for some closure?
We work hard on this matter. We need to reveal the truth. We need to follow up the perpetrators and those who were involved in these matters. We need to have coordination with the competent agencies and authorities, because the violations against the Syrians must be followed up. So many people, by the way, were caught by the judiciary system, and they are now under investigation in Syria. At the end of the investigation, the verdict will be in front of the people, because the people must see the fate of everyone who was involved in matters against them. We cannot hide justice. Justice must be known by everyone and in public. If there is some pitfalls here and there, it is acceptable, because our government is only a few months old, and things will go on, and within a short period of time we will see the results, and the citizens will also see the results of these matters, and the world will see it as well.
So you talked about building those cases and actually getting an investigating the truth. In the early days, we saw a lot of evidence being mishandled, not enough care being given to documentation or mass graves, etc. How are you preserving the evidence in order to go about investigating these cases?
سؤال مهم جدا. يعني دائما هذا ما نسميه في اللغة القانونية مسرح الجريمة.
This is a very important question. I call this the theater of the crime. The government has issued some decisions. The president has issued some decrees not to change at all anything in the Sinai prison. This prison will be an evidence about the crisis and catastrophe that has been witnessed by the Syrian people. We kept and maintained as much as we could, and in the Ministry of Justice we kept and maintained all the documents that are in the military judiciary and in the judiciary. And I can tell you this piece of information for the first time. We have saved the archive of the field courts from being burned by the followers of the dilapidated regime, the defunct regime. We have concentrated on this, and we went immediately to the Ministry of Justice and to the military judiciary. We are trying to prepare everything, and we have managed to save these documents few meters away from the fires that were planned to get rid of them. I swear to God, we have a painful archive of violations documented by the previous regime. 100,000 people documented by the previous regime were documented and being killed and assassinated in the security branches. These things are made by the militias and the gangs. These execution cases are more than 100,000 documented by the defunct regime of al-Assad. Can you imagine this? This can never happen in any other country. In addition to the barrels and chemical weapons and those kidnapped by the security branches and the militias, we spoke about things within the Syrian law. More than 100,000 cases documented by the regime of al-Assad. We have these documents, and these documents will be given to families of the victims and to the judiciary people in order to keep the rights of the victims. It's quite important to make sure of this, and it's quite important to take to the trial everyone involved in these matters.
This is a massive challenge. I mean, just the documentation, as you mentioned, is huge. But then on top of it is the exhumation of bodies. I've been to Tadamun, I've been to Sidnaya, I've been to Homs, many mass graves. The exhumation of those bodies requires specialist care. Do you have those capabilities? Are you establishing those capabilities? Or are you seeking help from the outside world to gather that evidence?
The Syrian people, unfortunately, 14 years under the attacks of the barrels and mass graves, and unfortunately, we haven't seen any help from the international courts or from the international experts. We have not seen that, despite the activists' efforts to seek some help and support. The Syrian people now is convinced that justice must only be Syrian. This is the reason why we are working now locally through the country. The missing authority is there, the judicial system is there. Every single agent and authority in this country is working very hard, despite the lack of some capabilities, but we need to work hard. Yes, we are open to have some partners with different parts of the world, because we need to get the most sophisticated tools in this connection, and this is quite important. And we need to know the most sophisticated tools to be able to use the DNA factor. We are open to cooperate, we are willing to cooperate with everyone who is really willing to help Syria and to help injustice in Syria and to help Syrian institutions in order to know what is the fate of those people who went missing.
The former regime was in charge of Syria for nearly 6 decades. You've only had a few months, but having said that, there are a lot of expectations of results from your ministry, from the people, from the outside world, but it seems to be taking a lot longer than was expected. Why is there a delay, and how are you addressing it so that this process, which is quite important for Syria, starts to happen quickly?
Yes. Matter of fact, what happened during the liberation battle was like a miracle. Everyone saw the collapse of people who are supported by the devil, and we have seen the situation after the liberation. The ceiling of expectations was very high, and not everyone was putting in mind the volume of challenges. We expect, yes, corruption, but we haven't expected these volumes of corruption and technical collapse and collapse of values at the same time. That's why these institutions were very dilapidated, and the challenges were great. The Israeli intervention started from day one. Bombardment and incursions, and in supporting sects to be isolated, and the whole scene was not clear. We have seen problems in Assad-era, in the coastal area, and this has, in a way, hinder the path of rebuilding the Syrian country. We have seen serious matters, but the Syrian leaders and the Syrian people and the people support to the Syrian leaders have helped us at all to overcome the problem and to get this ship back to the right path and to the shore. And I expect the big help of Allah Almighty, and I expect to overcome all these troubles, and I expect a return to the right path. But we must put in mind the reality. We need the expectation ceiling to cope with the realities on the ground. We inherit a big problem. That's why we need all to face the matter. We need to talk openly to our people, and we need to understand the reason why the expectations now are a little bit low compared to the era during the victory. We need not to surrender to reality. We need to face the challenges. We need to be more keen to achieve gains and to get gains. And we have seen in a good way the solidarity amongst the people. We need to be aware, we need to be patient, we need to continue on building our country within the mechanism that is accepted by our people.
So what do you aspire to? What will be this new justice system based on? Is it going to be a modern system based on the British or the French systems? Are you going to get guidance from Sharia? How does this new legal system come into being?
We need to have a model that is a Syrian model. Syrian model that starts from the identity of Syria, from the constitutional declaration, from the separation of powers. There is the separation of power principle, the executive, the legislative, and the judiciary. Also, the marital status of everyone according to his sect or her sect must be put in mind.
Mr. Mazhar al-Wais, the Minister for Justice for Syria's interim government, thank you very much for talking to Al Jazeera.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much.